All right, let's get things started. First, I would like to welcome all of you to our webinar, Is Your Mobile Phone More Important Than Your Toothbrush? And just to say thank you for joining us today. My name is Alyssa Ettinger, and I work as a professional services manager here at Intuition. I'll be facilitating the webinar today, but feel free to ask any questions as we go, and we'll have plenty of time to cover those at the end of the presentation. One last item, just if everyone could make sure that you've muted your headsets or phones while the webinar is in process, it'll make sure we don't have any feedback issues. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce Brian Finnerty, our General Manager for Technology Solutions.
Thanks, Alyssa, and welcome to today's webinar, everybody, titled Are Mobile Devices More Important Than Your Toothbrush? So I'd like to introduce myself. My name is Brian Finnerty. I'm the General Manager of Technology Solutions here at Intuition, and I specialize in mobile learning and knowledge solutions. Just to give you a little background on the company, Intuition is a global knowledge solutions provider for large enterprises, and we have specific expertise in mobile, custom, and financial services learning solutions. So on to the topic at hand. What I'd like to talk about today is the growing importance of mobile, and I've broken that topic out into 4 key areas. So I'm going to focus on mobile millennials initially. There's a really interesting Bank of America study which I'd like to walk you through, which has some just fascinating findings. I'd like to look at Mary Meeker's Internet Trends report for 2014, which again has some just fascinating data on the growing influence of mobile in our world today. I'll talk a little bit about how mobile has gone global in the last couple of years, and it's a particularly noticeable trend in the last 2 or 3 years. And then lastly, I want to talk about how learning goes mobile. Largely in the enterprise is where I'm going to focus that conversation, but those are the 4 key areas that I'm going to talk about today. So first of all, let's look at early millennials. How important are mobile phones and mobile devices to millennials? Early millennials are in the age group of 18 to 24 now, and the Bank of America study I referenced shows that they view their mobile phones as the most important item in their daily lives, which I had to read that a couple of times before I'd sunk in, and I think you really get a sense of it when you see the study. More important than their deodorant, in fact, which is a somewhat scary prospect. But really, early millennials are moving into the workforce, and it's really clear that mobile phones are a huge part of their daily lives. So let's take a closer look at this Bank of America Trends in Consumer Mobility report. It was published this year, and if you break it down, you can see in terms of importance, mobile phones are top of the list, 96% in importance. Toothbrush, slightly secondary, 93%, deodorant 90%, and if you look at poor old television, it's only down at 54%, and a cup of coffee, which most of us are partial to, 48%. So you can get a real sense of the priorities and how they're shifting in this new generation that's coming into the workforce now. So let's look at mobile internet usage. A really interesting thing has happened in the last year whereby mobile users have surpassed desktop users. There are now more people accessing the internet on mobile devices than on the desktop, and that's a real turning point for us both professionally and personally. So mobile usage increased 81% in 2013. Most of that usage is happening in apps, 47%. Rather than mobile web browsers, which are down at 8%. So really the future of mobile is apps, and the desktop continues to kind of level out and decline against mobile, which has shown just incredible growth over the past, since 2007, but certainly over the past 3 or 4 years, its growth has been undeniable. So we're looking at a world where mobile comes first in so many areas. So take a simple example of webmail users opening their email. How are they accessing their email? 61% of web users, according to a litmus study, are accessing their email on mobile devices. The desktop is down at 17%, and you can see webmail is at 22%, but mobile is the lion's share of how people are accessing webmail today. So not only is the number of mobile devices increasing, but we're starting to use them to do more and more things. So To me, this means that mobile is a natural extension to the tasks that are already being completed, and people are just using their phones to do things that they would have done on the desktop otherwise. So what about this love affair with our mobile phones? Again, really interesting Fast Company article shows that 25% of smartphone users simply can't recall the last time their smartphone was not beside them or next to them. So people are really in love with these devices. They will not put them down, put them away, distance themselves from them. Another interesting statistic for you, the number of times smartphone users reach for their device each day is 150 on average. And that's according to Mary Meeker's Internet Trends report in 2013. So 150 times a day, people are reaching for that smartphone device, picking it up and interacting with it. The Journal of Behavioral Addictions has a particularly interesting article on female and male college students. Again, back to that millennial demographic that I talked about at the start. Female college students spend on average 10 hours a day on their cell phones, and male college students slightly less, 8 hours a day on their cell phones. So you may be asking the question where they get time to study, but the fact remains cell phones are an integral part of their daily lives. And this really harkens back to the original Bank of America report, which shows just how important mobile devices and smartphones are in people's daily lives. In fact, it's become such an issue that a Californian called Brian Perez came up with a game called Phone Stack, whereby he was just tired of people going for a meal in a restaurant. Everybody's distracted, looking at their phones, getting and sending texts, checking their updates on Facebook and Twitter, and he created the Phone Stack game. So the game is really clever. You stack up your phones in the middle of the table, and the first person who reaches for their phone at any point during the meal has to pay for the whole meal. So it's really interesting the way that we've now started to come up with some mobile etiquette rules, which are kind of informal and loose and a little bit fun, but it does speak to the fact that these devices are in our lives at all times, morning, noon and night. And I guess the purpose of Brian's game was to allow people to focus on a different kind of stack, a stack of pancakes. You know, that's what you should be doing when you're in a restaurant having a meal, not checking your phone constantly and ignoring the people who are sitting with you. So this leads me on to the question about mobile obsession. Are we mobile obsessed? I think you know my answer to this question by now with some of the statistics that I've presented today. So let's take a look at where this mobile obsession is leading us. And I think one of the most interesting thinkers on the internet and trends is Mary Meeker, and she does her annual report, Internet Trends Report, which was released a couple of months ago in 2014, looking back to the year 2013. And you can see some fascinating statistics that back up what's happening with people's mobile obsession. So let's take the very first of those, which is an undeniable shift. Mobile data traffic is up 81% in 2013. So by any measure, that is a massive increase in the amount of data moving across mobile networks. And that speaks to the fact that people are using their mobile devices more and more. More people are getting access to mobile devices, and more people are using them intensively throughout the day. Again, from Mary Meeker's Internet Trends, mobile hit 25% of total web usage in 2013. So in such a short space of time, really less than a decade, mobile usage has kind of consumed a quarter of total web usage, which again is another really staggering statistic globally when you think of the amount of people on the web and how they're accessing the web. Mobile is already at 25%, and I'm sure if I give a similar presentation a year from now, we'll be pretty astounded by the number that is reached in 2014. So let's take a look at some Silicon Valley darlings, Facebook, Twitter and the like. How have they responded to this changing demographic, changing use of mobile versus desktop? Really interesting statistic, 189 million Facebook users are mobile only. In other words, they do not access Facebook through the desktop or through a browser on their desktop. They're simply using the mobile app. Again, that's coming from Mary Meeker's Internet Trends report. you know, it's really fortunate for Facebook that they responded to the mobile trend. I remember when they had no functional mobile app a few years ago, not that long ago, and now they have a user base of almost 200 million people purely accessing the Facebook service through their mobile device. Last quarter, Facebook's mobile revenue accounted for 2/3 of its overall revenue. So again, pretty undeniable that a company like Facebook, which I know is consumer-facing, but nonetheless 2/3 of its revenue came from mobile devices, advertising on mobile devices. That's a pretty incredible number. And you can see how much of their profit and their revenue is fueled by mobile. What about Twitter then? Twitter, again, is even more dependent on mobile revenue than Facebook, you could argue. Last quarter, 81% of Twitter's revenue came from mobile advertising. And their mobile user count reached 211 million people, a gain of 29%. So again, these are figures from Twitter's last quarter results. So you can see that they're fully engaged in mobile as well. And it wouldn't be fair to talk about Facebook and Twitter without mentioning Apple. You know, Apple is right in the heart of this movement, this shift towards mobile. You could argue they continue to feed our obsession with smartphones. And a really interesting statistic here, they sold 10 million new iPhone 6 devices in the first 3 days from release of that device. And queues across the country, across the world. I believe a lot of those phones have ended up on the black market and are being sold, but nonetheless, shifting 10 million units of a new phone within 3 days is just phenomenal. That shows you the built-up demand, and it's not that long ago since the iPhone 5 was released. People still have just this burning desire to get their hands on the latest and greatest device from Apple. Okay, so I've thrown a lot of statistics at you in terms of what's happening in the landscape there, trends on the internet, use of mobile devices, how millennials are changing the landscape. What about mobile learning? We can see that mobile usage is exploding off the charts. Are we seeing the same thing in the enterprise with mobile learning? Pretty interesting to note that by 2015, the mobile workforce globally will reach 1.3 billion people, so 37% of the total workforce according to IDC. So there's no denying that mobile is making its move into the enterprise, into the professional sphere. And if you look just at the Americas region, US, Canada, Latin America, you'll see the number of mobile workers is predicted to grow to over 212 million in 2015, which is right around the corner. So the mobile workforce is globally very substantial, almost 40% of the total global workforce. And within the Americas region, over 200 million people on mobile devices. And again, if I give this presentation 12 months from now, I think we'll be surprised by the growth rates that we're seeing through 2014 as well. From a study called Mobile Learning at Work, again, interesting to note that 78% of mobile users think that integrating learning into the workflow is either important or critical today. So users have gotten used to the fact that mobile devices are pervasive, they're ubiquitous, and now they're expecting learning to be integrated into the workflow, to be available on those devices by a huge majority. So the question is, why is this not happening yet in the enterprise? And I have a few thoughts on why that's the case. The enterprise always lags consumer, but in this case, I think we can see why that's happening. So I argue that enterprise learning is at an inflection point right now, and what's happening is heavily structured, formal, desktop learning is simply out of touch with modern real-time enterprises. And we have a substantial workforce of millennials coming in who have different expectations, different beliefs about how they'll access training, how they'll improve their skills. Learning solutions are more performance-focused now, and the formal, structured, desktop-driven learning that is synonymous with most learning management systems is simply out of touch, I would argue. So new modes of learning and new technologies are really needed to respond to this explosive growth in mobile. And I think what we're talking about here is mobile learning for the enterprise, built from the ground up for the enterprise, meeting the needs of those new users and current users right where they are. So let me talk a little bit about Intuition's mobile platform. Really what we do is aim to bring learning right down to each user's preferred device, wherever they roam, wherever they are. And I think it's important for every enterprise today to have a clearly defined mobile strategy where you meet learners where they work with on-the-go learning experiences. The ideal deliverable for mobile learning is it should leverage your organization's speed and competitive strengths. So if you can get knowledge, information in the hands of your users, your employees, right when they need it, at the point of need, at the time of need, that's far, far more valuable to you as an organization than having someone sit down and take 40 hours of training over the course of 3 weeks in a very structured environment and then perhaps not put that learning into practice for months or even years. So mobile changes the game really for learning and for large organizations. So I think mobile learning has multiple use cases and applications. So the slide here says, what can I use mobile learning for? The primary thing you can use mobile learning for is sales effectiveness. So you're training a large distributed sales force. I think mobile learning is a great use case for that. Performance support is another use case where people need answers in the moment of need, right at the point of need. If they're client-facing, it's critical that they can get answers to specific questions. And mobile devices are always with them. It's a great way to deliver performance support type solutions to clients. Systems training, marketing communications to the field, again to customer-facing employees or technicians. Soft skills training, it's a great fit for regulatory and compliance training, again, which is moving away from that more desktop-bound environment to a more mobile environment. Product launches, surveys, there's many different applications for mobile learning. But I think the key one is that you're bringing learning from a large silo in the organization on an LMS, you're bringing it down to individual employees and users and delivering it right into their hands on a preferred device. So what I'd like to do now is just look at a few case studies or examples where Intuition has applied mobile learning in a professional setting or a professional environment. And one of the first ones I'd like to look at is the use of rich media learning. And again, I feel that increased bandwidth and buffering technologies have made video-based learning very possible on mobile devices. It's a great way to learn, and this is the kind of thing that people like to take on the go. Testimonials, case studies, war stories, not something you necessarily want to sit down at the desk and sort of pour through during your workday. It's the kind of thing you can do when you have a few minutes if you're on the road or on a plane, basically using a mobile device. It's a great use case for a mobile platform. And I think technology has enabled rich media learning on mobile devices to the point where we now expect it. Another use case is key management skills. Again, I think mobile learning is a great use case for this. There's certain types of learning solutions that just work well on mobile devices. So if you're working on diplomacy, people skills, other kinds of learning, the iPad is a terrific device to do that kind of training. Don't take everything personally. I try to follow that in my own experience as well. But that kind of training, that kind of soft skills training, I feel is very well suited to mobile delivery. What about extremely technical training? So remote technical training, and the example I'm going to give here is a client who works in the oil and gas industry, and they use our mobile player to deliver technical training to their engineers. So these are people on oil rigs in the middle of the ocean, truly mobile, quite often no internet connection, so they need an offline player which can deliver content, and it's truly mission critical content about drilling equipment, drilling procedures, safety procedures, and again they're using industrial iPads, phones to get access to this content at the point of need. So these are not the kind of people who are going to sit down at the desktop and do 20 hours of training. They're on a rig in the middle of nowhere, and they need that learning at their fingertips. So it's pure for performance support with a very technical training content embedded into it as well. And then we can look at something like social learning. So where does social learning fit in with this explosion of mobile? I can tell you an example for intuition. Internally, we use a knowledge management platform called Advantage, which we've built, and we use it ourselves to drive employee engagement. It's designed to surface knowledge within the organization. I mean, we're located across multiple different centers. I'm here on the West Coast in San Francisco. We have an office in New York, London, Dublin, all across the globe. So we're truly a global company. And one of the big challenges, how do you share knowledge across those teams? You know, best practices, domain-specific expertise. You want to make it fun and sticky for people. So we've built this Advantage platform that allows you to do that. You can create networks of expertise for different product groups or different parts of the organization, and everybody communicates and collaborates in a social way. And I should add that this application, this platform runs on all mobile devices as well, so people can access it on their phone when they're on the move, iPad, and desktop as well. So to give you one example, this is a domain expert in our organization. Cormac, we can see all of his contact information, his work history, you know, some of his educational accolades, and he is connected to many different people across intuition in the organization. So he's a real influencer, he's a domain expert, and we use the Advantage platform to leverage that knowledge and spread it out across our different territories. So it's a great usage of knowledge management and mobile technologies coming together to do something quite powerful across a globally distributed organization like ours. What about virtual reality? I think, again, this is another interesting use case for mobile. And the example I'm going to give you here is a case study from a global communications group, a client of ours. The challenge was to create a new hire onboarding program that was a cut above their traditional in-person program. So each building within the virtual campus represents a different part of the company, and new hire employees were encouraged to go in, create an avatar, create a profile, and explore the virtual campus. So move through the virtual campus, go into different buildings, HR, finance, understand the company and the layout and structure of the company. And they had a virtual reality guide that kind of walked them through the company's history, all the different components of the company. So it was a really engaging, interesting way for them to learn about the company as they were being onboarded and to understand what the company did in a meaningful way. Much better than classroom training. People could take it at their leisure on multiple devices, and it really had a huge impact in getting those new hires up to speed quickly on the core business functions and how the company operated. One other example I want to talk about is a popular one at the moment, gamification. And again, with the change in demographic of the workforce, the millennials moving into management roles and senior positions, gamification is a really important part of the learning landscape now. So one example I want to give you here is of a global pharmaceutical company. They had a requirement to train sales reps on specific compliance-related content. And the annual course was traditionally given on the desktop in a sort of a dull page-turner format. And there was a real challenge with attention and retention there. So the topic was jaded, and users were clicking through the topic just to get through it and get it done for the year. So we created a board game scenario where users could skip ahead based on their existing knowledge, because some people had been in the company many years and they had a lot of compliance knowledge. They could fast-track their way through the game by answering difficult questions and moving on to the next level. New hires would go through, block by block, piece by piece, but it's still a more interesting and more engaging format, much better than, the previous scenario, which was really just not a fun, not an interesting, exciting experience for anybody in the organization. It's compliance training. It's critical to the business. It has to be done. It can be done in a fun and engaging way, and it can be mobile as well. So that's one example of a mobile game-based solution that we delivered. So the last point I'll make following on from all of these scenarios is that mobile learning and learning in general should be fun. And if it's fun and appealing, people will engage with it. They'll recommend it to their peers, they'll enjoy the mobile learning experience, and they'll definitely, come away talking about it, feeling like the company has made a real effort to, even on some quite dull statutory, regulatory training, made an effort to make it interesting, engaging, and made it accessible to them, so they're not locked at their desk, during business hours, forced to take, this training that just isn't very appealing or engaging or fun at the end of the day. Okay, so I'm nearing the end of my presentation now. I just wanted to summarize my thoughts on mobile learning. It's a good fit for users who spend a lot of time away from their desk. Commuters, sales staff, consultants, and field technicians are good immediate prospects, although I would argue, with some of the data I've shown you today, the trends in mobile are moving right throughout the enterprise. So every single employee is relying more on mobile devices, doing more with those mobile devices. So mobile learning is not just for field or customer-facing employees. I think it's fast becoming something for all employees. It lets users learn on the go at their convenience, a time and place and device of their choosing, with no degradation of the learning experience. In fact, in many cases, it's an improved learning experience on mobile devices. So my parting argument here is I think there's a definitive shift towards mobile learning in the enterprise, and I think it's incumbent on all of us who work in large organizations to think about how that should affect the way we deliver learning and the way learning is deployed, managed, and pushed out to, to a large group of employees. Okay, so that's the end of my formal presentation. We're almost on the half hour here, so I think I will hand it back to Alyssa. And Alyssa, if we could open this to the floor for Q&A.
Sure, perfect. Thanks, Brian. So we had a couple of questions coming in while you were going through, so I'll just read those out and have you answer them. So the first one that I have here is, so services like Twitter have seen people gravitating towards short information bites on their phones. So is there a happy medium that can be reached when creating content that's more suitable for both mobile and desktop, or should they be creating content that's, one for mobile and one for desktop?
I mean, that's a great question. I think, to be honest, I think that people are becoming more and more comfortable with short form factor, Twitter, 140 characters, bursts of information, and kind of less inclined to do the formal 20, 40 hour, training experience. So I think you can offer both. I don't think they're mutually exclusive. I think it's important that you don't just rely on the traditional formats, that you consider the changes that we've discussed in the workforce, in people's expectations. As they move through the ranks in an organization, they become the leaders, the thought leaders, the business leaders, and their expectations of learning and performance support are quite different. So I would say, in general, things are trending towards shorter, more concise, bite-sized chunks of learning, and that to me is just a perfect match for mobile learning. I mean, that I think is where mobile learning excels, where you have some time, you have a very specific need, information need, knowledge need, training need, and you can fill it quickly with a minimum of fuss. You launch an app, you find what you're looking for, you take a little piece of training, and you move on. You can apply it immediately in your job. It's true performance support, or you can file it away and use it in future scenarios. So I would say it's not mutually exclusive. People's attention spans are getting shorter, their need for information is growing, but you do need a platform, a mobile platform, to organize all of that and just make it really easy and secure and comfortable for people to access that information.
Okay, perfect. Thanks. And then I have another question here. So it was regarding the technical content that you discussed. For this person, technical content would be similar to Cisco training. So how would something like that be delivered via mobile device?
Yeah, I have a long background myself in technical training, actually, software developer training, and even training on routers and modems and stuff like that, operating systems. So, there are limitations. There's certain types of training that just require what I would call flight simulator service, where you really have incredibly complex simulations, scenarios that require the processing power of a desktop or a very sophisticated machine or piece of technology. So for software developer training, for example, if you're using an IDE like Visual Studio or something else like Eclipse, you need to have access to that application. It needs to happen on the desktop. However, with any kind of training, there's always conceptual material. There's always quizzes, surveys. There's always fresh content. So no matter how technical the training, I think it's incumbent on you to deliver it in a creative way, and I think it's incumbent on you to deliver the pieces that can work on mobile to do so that it's an integrated experience for people, so they're not completely locked on the desktop. And I would argue, that the oil and gas company that I showed you, that drilling example, the content for that training was incredibly technical, incredibly convoluted materials, but a lot of it could be delivered on mobile devices in a fresh and appealing way. So I think it's absolutely true that you can use mobile with technical content, not for everything, but certainly for quite a large portion of that content works well in mobile. And if you have a good mobile platform, the kind of interactions between desktop and mobile should be pretty seamless as well.
Great. Perfect. And I just received another great question. So what is the trend for non-millennials in the adoption of mobile usage and learning?
I don't have research to point to on that beyond really what Mary Meeker has shown in her study, which is across the board, mobile is gobbling up, web usage data. We're all doing it. We're all using it. We're all more reliant on our mobile devices. And I think what I'd like to do with that question is I'm sure there are studies that show beyond the millennial generation how mobile is changing behaviors at work. But I think we can all look at our own lives anecdotally, and you can see that your reliance on iPads, using Netflix to stream movies, to watch original series, the fascination with every Apple release, the absolute adoption of Android devices in the market. We're all changing the way we work. We're less tied to our desktops, which is a good thing. Now you've got the whole tablet segment of the market, which is eating into desktops as well. So rather than having a desktop or a laptop, people are getting, an iPad or a Surface. And so the environment is undeniably changing. And the statistics that Mary Meeker shares are, they're kind of they're really hard to ignore. I mean, it's really clear that mobile is proliferating, and it's not just among millennials, it's among all working professionals.
Great, thanks, Brian. Just another question here. What would you see as the biggest obstacle to implementing a mobile learning platform for the first time?
I think the biggest obstacle is initially recognizing the fact that your people expect to learn this way, and that's only going to increase. So I think a lot of people are sort of, we'll wait and see. I think this is a trend. Maybe it's a passing fad in some people's minds. The data doesn't show that. The data shows that this is a real revolution in how we work, and the speed at which the mobile adoption is happening just, I think, blows that out of the water. I think we're all going to be increasingly mobile in the way we work and the devices we use, and I think if you're working in a large enterprise and you're responsible for delivering knowledge solutions or learning to a large distributed group of people, you've probably heard some grumbling about the LMS, how the LMS isn't conducive to the way people work. It doesn't offer performance support. I can't access it on my mobile device. If I'm out of the office, I'm locked out. LMSs do a very specific thing, learning management systems, and they do it well in terms of organizing learners into groups and so on and managing different learning resources. When it comes to mobile learning, they just don't do it well. So that's where I think you need some specialist knowledge. You need dedicated mobile solutions that plug in to your existing LMS and that sort of play nice with it and run alongside it and kind of offer mobile as a transparent layer. So you don't need to You certainly don't need to throw out your LMS and restart. Most really good mobile learning platforms will integrate seamlessly, and they just give users that mobile experience securely on multiple devices. It's just a real enhancement on top of what you've got, and I think people need to sort of think about that and apply that to their own business, and see that mobile could be a real win. It could be a real win in a short space of time on top of what you've already got. You've already got a sophisticated corporate university, and people are taking content, but maybe they're not totally happy with how the content is presented or delivered to them. You can add a mobile layer as a really quick win to make that happen.
Okay, great. And I just have, I think, one more question, unless anyone comes in. So, is it possible to go completely mobile, or do you think that this company still needs to cater to the desktop for the foreseeable future?
I think realistically you're looking at a hybrid environment. Maybe for some businesses, for new businesses and startups, they can go completely mobile and it's not going to impact their business. I think for larger enterprises, the reality is, that would be my area of expertise, sort of B2B enterprise software solutions. You're looking at a hybrid environment where you have incumbent LMS or HR, ERP systems. They're not going to go away. You would not want them to go away. What you can do is you can really enhance them with a mobile solution, and that mobile solution does not need to be native to the LMS or to the ERP system. It just needs to play nice with it and follow all of the industry standards in terms of passing data back and forth, recording scores, security, device management, and so on. So I think for most large companies, you're still looking at a hybrid environment. But as I said during the presentation, the trends that we're seeing on mobile usage data and adoption this time next year, I can only see that accelerating. And I think the shift is already begun. We're at an inflection point, and I think the move is definitely towards mobile. So more and more learning and more knowledge solutions will be delivered on multiple devices with an emphasis on mobile. Don't think the desktop is going to go away completely, but I definitely think its days are numbered as the dominant mode of accessing, knowledge, performance support, learning, things like that.
All right, thanks, Brian. That's all the questions we have, or that I've gotten over here. So I'll hand it over to you to sign off.
Great. Well, listen, I'd just like to say I can give you 20 minutes of your day back, which is good. I'd like to thank everyone for taking the time to listen in, and we will be in touch with access to the archive for this session, and we'll also be sharing my slides from the session. My email address is there on the slide, so if anyone has any specific questions or follow-up questions that didn't occur to you during the session, feel free to reach out to me directly. And that's it. I'd just like to say thank you very much for your time today, and enjoy the rest of your day.